O'clock, so let's call this meeting of the Grafton Select Board to order, August 20th, 2019. Mr. Carlson, if you will read the announcements.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Last of the summer concert series will be tomorrow, Wednesday, August 21st, starting at 6:30 p.m. The concert featuring the Clayton Hill Symphony will be held at the Great Hall at Apple Tree Arts. Next up, Nick Childs, who was recently appointed as the Emergency Management Director, received recognition from the International Association of Emergency Managers for becoming a Certified Emergency Manager, or CEM for short. This is the highest honor of profession achievement available from the association. Presently, the CEM designation is held only by 1,919 men and women in the emergency management profession. In order to maintain certification, Nick must continue a program of professional development over a successive 5-year period in the future. Thus, this is an honor neither easily earned nor maintained. The town wishes to congratulate Mr. Childs on his accomplishment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Just to set the stage here for our first item on the agenda, as many people in the community know, on Friday we were alerted that there was a case of Eastern equine encephalitis found in Grafton. An alert went out both by telephone and through social media about the case, and since then there has been a considerable amount of discussion in the community about exactly how we should handle this and what the next steps are. That's why the Board of Health is here, present with us tonight, to give us their insight as to next steps and their thoughts on what has transpired. And also we're going to be obviously receiving an update from Becca, who can fill us in on the specifics. So first of all, thank you all for coming. And to the members of the public, people in the room, I will take some questions to the extent that anybody in the community has them. I think this is an important item to discuss publicly. I think we should be as open and transparent as possible in the process. But what I don't want to do is get into a prolonged discussion about the pros and cons of spraying. As people also know, the state has made a determination that at some point in the very near future, I assume, they're going to be doing some spraying. We don't have any control over this. They're going to do it whether or not we think it's a good idea, whether or not we think it's effective. If people have questions, comments, or concerns about the efficacy of spraying, the health hazards of spraying, I would direct you to your state representatives, your state senator, the governor's office, and the Massachusetts Department of Health. I think it's important always to direct complaints to the right individual so that you can be helped in life. It does you no good to come in here and complain to us. We have no control over that. So with that, Becca, could you give us an update on where we stand, maybe a little background on what has happened,
Sure.
and then we'll open up discussion.
Yeah, so like Ed said, Friday we were notified about the Tripoli case. We sent out a code red and put on the webpage and social media that the case had been determined to be positive in Grafton. Since then, there was sort of a lot of back and forth about whether or not the town would be making the determination on whether to spray or whether it would just be made for us. We have since found out. I was on a call yesterday afternoon with Karen Clark and Karen, I don't know, Karen was also on the call. And the state basically said, look, you're in a critical risk zone. We are going to spray. There's no vote or decision for us to take here tonight about whether or not the spraying is happening. It is going to happen. They will do aerial spraying. It's through the Department of Agricultural Resources who does the spraying. So over the next couple of days or a week or so, I assume we will be getting more information from the state about when it will occur, how it will occur. If there's anything that our residents need to do to prepare for it, the state will let us know. So I assume that will happen very soon. We obviously did outreach on, like I said, Code Red. We notified the public when the case was tested positive, and also when we heard about the spraying that it would actually be taking place. Received a lot of comments about people concerned about vegetables, about plants, water, bees, all of that. The state has a fantastic webpage, has a lot of information about all of those things. And I would really direct people to the state. They have a specific hotline for bees and beekeepers. So if you are a beekeeper and you are worried about your bees, please utilize that resource at the state. Karen and the Board of Health, I think, one of the things that we talked about a little bit that we do have the power to determine is whether or not we want to restrict activity in town after the time that's set by the state. So that is a power that the Board of Health does have. They would get to make that call. The town has already taken steps to restrict recreation-sponsored activity after those times. So any programs that Recreation does do, we're not having them after the times on the calendar that are on the website. It changes every week based on when the sun sets. I think right now it's something like 7:30, but that will change as we get later in the season. If the board has questions, if the Board of Health has questions, Karen can also answer a lot of questions, but that's sort of where we're at today.
Okay. Were there any particular insights you guys wanted to weigh in with where
I
we
just
are?
want to mention that it's not only the human case that we had a confirmation for Triple E on Friday, but we have since been notified that Grafton had 2 Triple E positive mosquitoes that were mammal-biting mosquitoes. Upton had a mosquito, and then Westboro had a mosquito a couple weeks ago. So it's beyond just the one human case at this point.
I think that begs the question, is that a lot?
You guys.
Hi, my name
Better
is
experts.
Tim Deschamps. I'm the director of the Central Mass Mosquito Control Project. So as far as the mosquito collections go, they can be collections up to 50 individual specimens. They are sorted by species. And the collections that were identified both in Grafton and Upton were human-biting mosquito species. So it is very concerning that it has shown up in those types of species. So it was not completely unexpected. Obviously, with the human case, we knew that it was potentially in the environment, and it did confirm that finding.
Okay. Was there a human case in Westboro, or was there a mosquito collected in Westboro?
It was a collection of mosquitoes in Westboro about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the one other human case is down in southeastern Mass, and then they just recently had a goat test positive down in Norton or somewhere in that area also.
I thought I had read this week that there usually are about a handful of cases of Triple E every year in Massachusetts, maybe 2 or 3. Is that
It
about
does
right?
tend to be cyclical. It tends to run on a 7-year cycle.
Sure.
Many years, the past few years actually, we have not identified any Triple E in any of our mosquito collections. It is a rare disease, thankfully, and the last human cases, I believe, were back in 2012 and 2013. So sometimes, these individual cases do come up. We went through a fairly long drought period from about 13 to about the end of 2016, early 2017. A lot of the species that will get that mosquito virus going in the bird populations, their numbers were dramatically reduced. But since that drought had eased, and then the way the climate has been, unfortunately those populations have rebounded, and now we're seeing the results of that.
Okay, and what can people do to protect themselves from coming down with the Triple E?
Well, regardless of any spraying that's being done, it's always important to know that the mosquitoes are most active around sunset up to about midnight, and again around the dawn hours. If you can modify your outdoor activities to be more during the daytime. Mosquitoes can be active during the day, especially on a cloudy day if it's relatively cool. But if you're in an area of high mosquito populations and you have to be there, let's get as much exposed skin covered as possible, long sleeves, long pants. And we recommend any repellents with the ingredient DEET being the most effective. But if some people are a little concerned about the effects from DEET, any EPA approved repellent can also be effective as well.
Okay. Obviously, there was a case of Triple E found in Westboro 2 weeks ago. Was there anything that we should have been doing in the interim between a couple weeks ago and now to have gotten word out, prepared for the eventuality? I mean, mosquitoes don't know property lines, right? So if there's one in Westboro, there could be very many in Grafton.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, they do not stop at the town boundaries. When any mosquito collection comes positive, a certain range, radius around that positive mosquito, these local officials should be aware. The public should certainly be aware too. Grafton's a little bit difficult. They're not a member currently of our mosquito district, so there's no consistent trapping that's been ongoing. With the human case that did show up, Mass Department of Public Health was able to free up some staffing. They did some surveillance over the weekend in some of these communities around us, therefore identified that in the mosquito collections as well. But it can be difficult in some instances to know exactly what's going on when we're not doing the surveillance ahead of time. But again, when a positive mosquito or unfortunately a mammal is confirmed with these viruses, it's a safe assumption that a fairly significant radius around that could also potentially have this virus.
Okay. Does anybody have any information on what we believe the state is going to do in terms of spraying, what kind of spray is being used, health hazards, things to stay away from?
Sure. So I'm Karen Clark. I'm the Director of Public Health for the City of Worcester and Central Mass Regional Public Health Alliance. So there's going to be actually another call tomorrow. We got an alert from the state late this afternoon, which I need to forward on to you folks. And it's going to be a 2:00 call we anticipate to talk more about exactly when they're going to be doing the spray. What we learned on a call yesterday was it is in fact out of an airplane. It's very fine mist, and it's sprayed about 100 feet above the canopy. But in looking at, the terrain and water and everything that goes into the habitat, there's some time that it takes for Mass DPH and the Department of Ag to really coordinate exactly where and when this is going to happen. It sounds to me like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that they probably do it more in the overnight hours. But we were assured, and certainly we're on top of this, that we want to know exactly when, and we need enough time to just make sure that we let residents know what's going on, and prepare them with all the, fact sheets and, what exactly is going to be sprayed. My understanding is that when it is sprayed, about 40 to 80% of mosquitoes that are out at that time when they're most active are actually killed, and that it works for about effectiveness for about 10 to 14 days. But I also am told that the spray, whatever they end up using, is not something that causes adverse health effects. It's safe. As Tim said, this has been done, I think it was 06 and about 2012, the last time this spraying occurred. And my understanding is that water testing is always done, and they work with the beekeepers to do some testing around there as well. So, we got some information off the call. We anticipate getting more definitive information tomorrow, and then whatever we do get, we will make sure that we can package that up and make sure that residents, have all the links to information they need to read through exactly what's in it and what they can expect and when.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that information, Karen. Is this the first time Grafton's been, has undergone aerial spraying, or will be going?
I believe so.
Yes.
Since Grafton's been with the Alliance, which is probably about 5 or 6 years now, this is the first time that I can recall it. So you've been around probably longer than me with mosquitoes, but, and whatnot, so you don't recall it ever happening?
No,
or-
I've been with the district for 36 years. There's
Okay,
been no
then no.
aerial spraying that's been done. Back in the 70s, some of us may recall applications for gypsy moth, but that would have been the last time anything was done aerially in our area for any insects.
Excuse me, which other towns are they gonna spray in? With the boundary situation, it's
Yeah.
probably the neighboring contiguous.
We're assuming that at this point. I haven't seen a map yet,
Yeah.
but considering it, I would think it would at least be the towns that are in the critical risk area right
and
now.
Probably the high-risk area,
Yeah.
because
It's most
Millbury
likely.
is high, and we believe they're gonna be
Right.
part of that as
Yeah.
well.
There's additional surveillance that's been done. I know our specimens from last week have gone in to be tested. We're expecting results tomorrow. Public Health has probably done some additional testing in some of these other areas as well. So more information is continuing to come in. We're hoping to learn either by tomorrow or Thursday at the latest what the actual area could possibly be. So that way we can certainly get more information out. Us as the district, we're more or less just the ground crew, if you will. As was stated earlier, it's really a decision at the Department of Public Health level and Department of Agricultural Resources. So we're here to to provide that support, moving things around and putting testing out and things like that. But we're involved as much as we can be.
Okay. If you all had your druthers, what could or should Grafton be doing in addition to what it's already doing to mitigate risk here?
Well, I would definitely recommend that Grafton considers joining the Central Mass Mosquito Control Program. Tim has already mentioned that there's not surveillance that's happening here. In fact, Worcester just joined 2 years ago for the first time. It's so much more capacity. The folks on their team, I mean, you obviously heard from Tim, 36 years doing this work. They're experts, they're scientists, they know everything you want to know about this. And even in Worcester, I think there were 13,000 catch basins that larvicide was dropped in. I mean, we could never do that. So anything to monitor, test, disrupt breeding grounds, obviously we advocate for. And, it was Mass DPH that came in after the individual tested positive, that they had their traps. And now we do find out that, there is in fact EEE positive samples in Grafton. There's no downside to it. I can tell you from my experience just in the last 2 years from the Worcester side, whenever there's a sample that's positive, say for West Nile, we work hand in glove. We identify a very specific geographical location that gets sprayed in the city. We use a reverse 911 system. People know what's going on. It's been pretty seamless. I mean, we had a couple of hiccups, I think, the first year, but that's to be expected. But I think the key thing, even in Worcester, we learned a couple years ago that the Asian tiger mosquito, I can't believe are you proud of me that I'm even saying this? The Asian tiger mosquito was detected in Worcester, and that's actually the mosquito that carries the Zika virus, which is obviously very concerning. I mean, we have a lot of intermodal, all of the CSX yard, there's things coming from all over the world. Mosquitoes fly. So I think it's at a point where in the city we felt we needed this extra layer. We're very happy with it, and I think case in point, these things can and do happen, and I think to have all the tools in the toolbox to fight these things are critical. So that's my recommendation.
Okay. And is anybody aware of what the symptoms are that people should be looking for if they may contract this?
That's you, Sam.
Yeah. There you go.
These are headaches.
I'm Sam Telford. I'm Professor of Infectious Disease and Global Health at Tufts, Director of the Regional Biosafety Laboratory, and also happen to be a member of the Department of Public Health's Mosquito Advisory Group, as well as Commissioner for Central Mass Mosquito Control. I have worked personally on Eastern equine encephalitis virus up at the RBL and at Harvard previously. It is the most devastating of all of the vector-transmitted infections. A third of the people die, and those who don't usually die within 6 years at a cost of $2 million per case because of the care that's required. So this is no joke. And so I hear skepticism with people, well, it's just one case. But the point is, because DPH is so concerned about this infection, they consider what we know is a last resort, which is aerial spraying. And I think that has prevented additional cases. The last fatality that I know of was in Westboro in 2013. So I think we've prevented additional cases of this devastating illness by this aerial spraying. None of us like to put chemicals in the environment, which is why Central Mass, most of their activity is prevention. That is reducing the burden of larval mosquitoes in the environment, which means that they don't become adults. So with West Nile virus, with Eastern equine encephalitis, it can start with a high fever, quickly progressing. Both of them can have a stiff neck, headaches, muscle aches, fatigue. Unlike West Nile, Eastern moves very quickly. So once you start having headaches and fever, you could be intubated within 24 hours and die within 48 hours. In the laboratory, it kills mice within 3 days. It kills cells within 1 day. It takes 6 or 7 days for cells to die with West Nile virus. This is so nasty. So this is not an infection to consider lightly. And there is West Nile virus around right now. In Worcester, my guess is if we looked hard enough in Grafton, it'd be found in Grafton as well. I used to do surveillance over on the Tufts campus. I sort of gave that up because it's sort of like, well, I know we're going to find here. The Hopkinton Westboro area seems to be one of these hot spots for Eastern equine encephalitis virus with the cedar swamp there. And so when the Eastern virus detections were being made in mosquitoes at unprecedented rates, I mean 5-6% infection rates for mosquitoes in southeastern Mass, Tim and I were going, well, we're going to find this from Bolton all the way down to southeastern Mass, and in the last week, that's exactly what's been found.
Now, you're saying unprecedented. This comes in waves of 7 years or so,
does.
but is this higher than it was 7
This
years
is
ago?
way higher, and in fact, the main mosquito that keeps it around is a bird-feeding mosquito. Their populations are 5 times higher this year than any other year in the recent, 10 years,
At
20
least,
years? So we've had this confluence of factors, a perfect storm, as you will, to amplify this virus in nature, which normally is at a very low level and we don't see it.
Okay. Knowing where we are now, we're at the point where we are at the last resort where we're spraying, and hopefully that has some effect. And knowing that we're probably going to be in this position, if not next year, then at least over the course of the next 5, 6, 7 years, what should we be doing, or what would the CMMCP recommend that we do to mitigate the chances that we're going to see these unprecedented levels again in a few years?
You know, mosquitoes are hard to control. Prevention is, West Nile virus control is very different than Eastern equine encephalitis control, because West Nile virus is mostly an urban phenomenon, or mosquitoes that breed in containers around people's yards, whereas Eastern equine encephalitis, the cattails that are in retention ponds and wetlands, that's where they breed, and it's hard to get materials in there to actually control them.
Sure.
But with an organized mosquito control program, you get heads-up surveillance. You get surveillance and a heads-up as to whether additional efforts needed to come in and try to nip things in the bud. But education comes with that program. And I think that's the one tool that we really need to use more often, is just to educate everybody that this isn't going away. It's just all around us because we enjoy living where we live, and with the forests around us. When we had no forest, we probably didn't have this problem.
Right.
Same with Lyme disease.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Anyone from Board of Health? Comments, questions, concerns?
Question, if we spray within the next week, then do you think we'll need to repeat spraying again before the next
That's
frost?
the recommendation.
State mentioned that.
Yeah, generally, public health recommends an aerial spray. Monitoring will, of course, happen both before and afterwards, but
couple weeks later.
generally, they'll recommend a second application. They're doing a second application down in southeastern Mass beginning tomorrow.
Okay.
And the reason for that being, the spray is not, all the mosquitoes are not active at once. So you're hitting the ones that are there. And a lot of people say, well, you spray, there's still mosquitoes around. What we want to do is hit the mosquitoes that are older, because the new mosquitoes that emerge are uninfected. They have to feed on a bird, get infected, and then they'll look for another blood meal. So the older mosquitoes are the ones that are targeted by the spray. Ones that appear after the spray are more likely to be ones that are new and not infected.
Okay.
So what we want to do is abort the population of old mosquitoes, so that, one, they don't infect people, but two, they don't spread it to new birds, which serves as a source of infection for new mosquitoes and continue the cycle.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to open it up to the public again. Not an opportunity for debate on spraying per se, but questions for the Board of Health and anyone else in the room about next steps and concerns. Come on up to the microphone. Just remember to state your name and where you're from, and speak into the mic.
North Street. I was just wondering, what's the lifespan of a mosquito? I mean, they live for a couple days, for a week, a couple weeks?
Some of them can live to take 3 or 4 blood meals. Typically, they emerge, it takes them 3 or 4 days to age enough for them to get hungry. They take a blood meal. 2-3 days later, they've digested it and start laying eggs. Once they've laid eggs, they can take another blood meal. They're not thought to live more than a couple weeks, and that's something that we did at the last aerial spray back in 2012, was to try to figure out, well, have we impacted the older population of mosquitoes by going out and collecting mosquitoes before and after and dissecting them, and it's an interesting process where you have to look at the ovaries of the mosquito to see how old they are. And we did see a drop in the age structure of the mosquitoes after spraying. But we figured that these mosquitoes have had at least one blood meal, so they're at least 8 to 10 days old. And they're likely to live another 10 days given the right weather. And weather plays a big role in this.
Okay.
What sort of weather makes it difficult for them to survive?
Dry weather, obviously.
Dry, yeah. Yeah, sunny, hot. Dry.
But paradoxically, heavy rains might also, because mosquito can't fly against a raindrop. They get bombed.
And when you spray, you said, was it 100 feet under the canopy? Is that what you said?
It'll be about 100 feet above the canopy.
And how high up is the canopy?
However high a tree is, I don't know.
Oh, okay. I mean, so in other words, it has to be, the aircraft has to be pretty low to the ground.
It's gonna be low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do it by aircraft, or I mean
Yes.
helicopter or fixed wing?
Airplane.
Airplane. Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Irene?
Irene Houle, 68 Carroll Road. I have a question for the young lady from the Massachusetts, from the department, from Worcester. I thought I heard you say that after spraying, it was effective for 10 to 14 days. Now, maybe I'm missing something, but on the CDC page, when they talk about whether or not we have to worry about, ill effects of this, it says that it dissipates within 24 hours. Where's the disconnect? What am I missing?
The CDC page is accurate. The type of spray they're going to be using is called Sumithrin. The trade name is Anvil 10+10. That designates that it's a 10% solution of Sumithrin, which is a synthetic pyrethroid. The synthetic pyrethroids, for the most part, that are used in mosquito control are non-residual, so they are effective overnight. Sunlight starts to break them down very rapidly. So in the daytime hours, it will start to diminish very quickly. And as public health has noted, there's no special precautions that need to be taken for most people, but there's a lot of people, of course, with special conditions that they have additional information that they can read about as well.
Okay, so the effectiveness of this is just the one-time spray, where if we're really lucky, we'll get that 80% number of the adult mosquitoes versus only the 40%. But as you said, what we're trying to do is get rid of the ones currently infected, because the new ones being born aren't yet infected. But we are looking at 24 hours, not 10 to 14 days.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, on the phone, that was what they said. I wrote it
No,
down.
So that's why I asked, what did I miss? Maybe you heard something that I didn't know.
That's what I heard on the call
the
yesterday.
half-life of the insecticide itself is no more than 3 days in sunlight. The effect on the mosquito population, you might be able to detect effects as long as 10 days. It's not. I'm a little skeptical of that.
Okay.
Which is why we recommend another spray 7 days later if we possibly can.
Right. Okay.
Anyone else?
Sharon Carol Tidman, 21 Virginia Circle. I had a question about aerial spray and you're attacking mosquitoes and so forth. What is the mosquito control board? Is somebody from the mosquito control board here?
I'm with the local mosquito district, but I'm not at the state level with the reclamation board.
So what are they doing about increasing or the predators? For, one of the things I read about Anvil is that it actually kills dragonflies, which is a predator of mosquitoes. And, there's many other predators of mosquitoes as well that could minimize and control the population. What is the mosquito control board doing in terms of increasing those populations?
It's not clear that right now, just in the last several hours, I had a student go down to Middleborough and set insect traps. We did this before the 2010 spray, before spray and after spray, to get it, and then this guy has to sit there and sort 17,000 insects and count them and identify them. And our graphs show that there is a dip right after spraying, but they all orders of insects come right back within 3 days. So like mosquitoes, you get new ones emerging over time that are not affected by the spray, that only hits the ones that are flying at that time. Predation is not known to really regulate mosquito populations. There's nothing out there that specializes in mosquitoes. Dragonflies will prey on anything. In fact,
Right.
mortality may be much higher during the larval stages of the mosquitoes than on the adults. So, and all of this stuff about bats, just complete nonsense.
Well, one of my concerns is that pesticide spraying as a form of removing insects or any kind of animal tends to create immunity in the insects,
Absolutely.
which means either the populations come back tenfold, make things worse, or they become immune to the pesticide and then you have to use the stronger pesticide. So how do you manage that?
No, you are right, and that's why we say it's a last resort. This level of intervention is a last resort. Now, there's ground-based application of insecticide that Central Mass and other mosquito control projects do, and they also test mosquitoes for resistance. So they'll get a heads up as to whether resistance is being caused. But there are a number of compounds that are currently being used today for mosquito control. They're switched out as resistance is detected. There's nothing unusual about what's going to be sprayed. You can go to Home Depot and get the same stuff for your tomatoes.
I know that. I don't use those either, so.
And resistance is a very complex
Right.
system where down in Florida, for example, they do have problems with it because there's a lot of insecticide pressure. They spray pretty much 12 months of the year. So as Sam mentioned, they have to test for it. If they see resistance in one type of chemical, they have to switch to a different type. Now, we've been performing resistance testing for well over 10 years. And because we recognize we're not the only ones that use pesticides. Homeowners do, there's private companies that do, golf courses, schools, et cetera. We've not detected any resistance to this point in any of our mosquito populations. And a lot of that is due to the fact that aerial spraying does not happen every week. So there's not constant pressure on these insects from any class of pesticides. And also, there's only a fairly short window of the year that pesticides are applied. You know, so in other words, from maybe mid to late spring through the summer, early fall months. Winter is a good ally for resistance because it wipes out most insects, the occasional, ant that shows up in your house notwithstanding, and kind of resets things again. But we recognize that resistance could potentially be a problem. We have done this testing for a number of years now, and thankfully have not noted anything. But it is something that, again, any type of pesticide usage is the last resort because we're trying to get them before we have to actually use that pesticide.
Thanks. Now, I had a question for you, because you said that everybody that gets triple E, it's usually pretty, severe and everything. Now, I heard it on the news, so, you have to take that in context, that they said like 96% of the people that actually are bitten by a mosquito with triple E actually don't see any symptoms at all.
That's for West Nile virus.
Oh, they
West
said
Nile
it was
virus.
triple E.
Very
Interesting.
different.
Yeah.
In fact, it's very strange that if you go out and you bleed, if we bled everybody down in southeastern Massachusetts, and there have been a number of limited studies showing there's no such, we don't see asymptomatic infection. We don't see people with antibody to Eastern virus who never report an illness. If I go out
I see what you're saying.
and bleed everybody in Grafton, I'd get 10, 12% of the people with Lyme disease antibody. Some of those will have said, oh, I've never been sick in my life. But you don't see that with Eastern. It's very strange.
Yep, that's good to know. Thanks. Diffused. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Anyone else? Okay.
Just real quick, is there any other action that the Board of Health is considering making? Sorry, I heard about this. Sorry, Bill. Is there any other action that the Board of Health is considering at this time that the public may want to be aware of?
So I think the state, I'm guessing we'd have to open, if we're gonna take any type of vote, we have to open our own little meeting that we have here if we're gonna have any type of discussion, if we're gonna take a vote. But the state strongly recommends canceling / rescheduling outdoor activities from dusk to dawn, and I know towns like Southborough already have closing their public facilities. So that was one of the asks on us to take the discussion up and a vote on that, whether we want to. Knowing that we've already reached out to pretty much everyone in town that has activities, schools, etc., and they're working on rescheduling. Some of them already have, but the state doesn't mandate it. but they strongly recommend, strongly urge, pretty much every other verb was stated on that call without telling us to mandate it from the state level.
So, I'm sorry, if I could just add on just a smidge. So I think this may have been mentioned earlier, I don't know, because I've been talking about mosquitoes nonstop since Friday, so I apologize, but, so the state, you know, to Karen's point, they've used a lot of adjectives, but at the end of the day, it's really the Board of Health's decision if they wanna cancel. But they also, they being the state, provided this calendar with these recommended times. So I think it's 8 o'clock now, but then
Yeah.
every week as we get into the fall, it goes back like a half hour. So, you know, I've been in conversation with Shrewsbury and Millbury about what's the board's pleasure. They haven't really made a determination, but so far, at least in Shrewsbury, which is also critical, they're going by this recommended cancellation calendar. Just as an FYI, what other alliance communities are doing, I suspect Millbury's gonna do the same. So there is guidelines in terms of like, what is that cutoff time? So your choice is to either go by that recommendation, or to Karen's point, have the board decide that it's just done, or, you know, at dusk.
I have a question, Karen. How far does the critical area extend? Like, I know you've talked about Millbury and Shrewsbury and Westboro and Grafton, but how far west does it go? How far east? Like, how much area are we talking about in terms of like?
Do you know, I know there were, I thought there were 10
Yeah.
communities on
It goes
Friday.
to Southborough, Hopkinton,
Upton.
Northborough and Marlborough are high risk. I believe it goes out to Shrewsbury.
Shrewsbury's, yeah, Shrewsbury's critical,
Shrewsbury's
Upton's critical, Northbridge is critical, Millbury is high, Sutton is high.
So most of the towns in our area are going to be doing the same exact thing about restricting activities. Just, I know there are people, you know, it's the right thing to do, obviously, but people are still like, oh, well, Friday night football games, well.
We have done this before, though. We did it
Right,
we did it a few years
right.
ago. We restricted activities.
Yeah, which we're, as you should, because it's a responsible thing to do, but I just wanted to get an idea of like
Yeah,
how
it's not-
wide-reaching
Yeah.
it is. It's not just us.
No.
Right,
It's,
and I think that the timeline is the middle of October generally, or whatever the first frost is, according to the Farmer's Almanac. It's October.
The first hard
Shows-
hard
Hard
frost.
freeze.
How old
Hard
I am.
frost, yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point, because we can't spray, for example, when the temperature is 60 degrees or less. Mosquitoes just aren't very active when it's cold, and the evenings have been pretty cool. I'm a little worried about the winter that's coming up. So we may not, you know, the calendar dates may not mean anything. It's actually what the weather is going to tell you. And if you have an evening where it's 55 degrees, it'd be stupid not to go out and enjoy it.
Right, but as far as rescheduling football games, moving football games from a Friday night to a Saturday afternoon,
Yeah.
they should go right through the season, I think.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
state's
that's a-
Prevent confusion.
Right, right.
And it's not like they can go play in Millbury and Shrewsbury instead.
right, that was my
Right,
point.
no, they,
Yeah,
it needs to
that's
be
what I was getting at. Yeah.
everybody in this area.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So, do we want to open our side to make, 'cause I mean, I think we should make a decision one way or the other.
Sure.
At least, because the state
Encourage.
tasked us
Yeah, it's
with doing that.
I'll
So
make a
we can
motion
make-
to open the meeting of the Board of
Second.
Health.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so our discussion is, do we, as I stated before we open the meeting, the state strongly recommends or urges that towns within the critical and high-risk areas, and we're in the critical, and along with towns around us, and then we have towns around us that are high also, so others will be having the same discussion. Do we want to either, one, go with just purely the state's strong recommendation that outdoor activities in town, schools, et cetera, get curtailed from dusk to dawn? Or two, do we mandate that they get canceled or rescheduled so they're not within dusk to dawn? Open that for discussion.
Sounds like it's pretty serious this year.
Right.
Yeah.
I would almost think canceling would be better. If we get somebody else who's sick in our town, it would look
Right. If people want to have
bad.
a pool party themselves, we can't dictate that they cannot do that if they wanna protect themselves or whatever, but as far as
Large populations.
municipal or school, agencies, I think we have to mandate it.
That's our charge, is to protect the public health.
Exactly.
And what about things that are not in the schools and not under recreation, such as softball leagues, little league,
I think
men's soccer?
I think we certainly can make a strong recommendation to them. Obviously, I don't think, know if we can necessarily mandate them, but we certainly can notify them that this is a public health risk, and that's our recommendation.
Right, and also patios at restaurants, we should get the word out.
Yeah.
We've
patios.
notified all the restaurants that have outdoors, radishes, et cetera, those with patios. We've notified the housing authority for the senior side of the world, the water districts, the rec department, who also manages the farmer's market side, all the school staff and beyond. And we did notify all the other sports that aren't under rec or school, so we gave them a heads up on Friday. So everyone's received the word, it's just that next level of what we decide if it becomes a mandate. So they're all working on it, to our knowledge, to try to rearrange, because obviously they all care about students and citizens' health.
Exactly. And most of the sports take place during the day anyway. Besides a few.
Friday night football.
Well,
But
there's
Little League
there's a
and
lot of
softball,
practices in
soccer.
the
Yeah.
evening, but it did happen, as you've said. I remember
It
several
did
years
happen
ago.
several
it-
years ago, we mandated it. I don't think it was actually until later on in September that
Maybe.
we did it, but we did do it
Yeah,
several
it's-
years ago.
It's not a new
No,
thing.
it's
We've
the
done it.
risk benefit, you don't wanna
Right.
open people up to it
Exactly.
any more than they already are exposed
Right.
privately.
If I may, real quick. So a lot of those, like intramural sports, or non-municipal sponsored or school-sponsored sports do happen on town property. So you can, I mean, we can.
That's true.
You can say no use of the fields past, 8 PM.
That's South
so,
Row did it that way.
You could do it that way. And those people who are gonna have the pool party or who are gonna play on a private field, I mean, we can't restrict that, but we can definitely strongly recommend. But I know that like softball, they play on Nelson Fields. I mean, we can tell them,
Yeah.
field closes at 8, so.
And I guess through the timeline or whatever suggested timeline of the first
Yeah.
hard frost.
Yeah, so like this calendar shows, let's say,
Today.
Right up to November,
So-
probably.
it's 7:45.
This week.
Then by the end of September, it's 6:45. Then by the end of October, if we haven't hit first hard frost yet, it's 6 o'clock, right before Halloween. Something to keep in mind if we don't have a first hard frost is Halloween, obviously down the line. Hopefully we'll have a first hard frost before then.
At our subsequent meetings, we can review that.
Yeah.
Revisit September, October.
Alright.
So
do
we need a
have
motion. I'll make a motion that we mandate, no activities on municipal fields or school fields after dusk until the first hard frost. And that we highly recommend, the same restraints for, the public, the general public as well.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All right, make a
I'll
motion.
make a
to close.
motion to close the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in. I know we're short.
Thank you.
notice. We really
And
appreciate
thank
it.
you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you all. We really appreciate it. Thank you for the information.
I'll stick around.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's give everybody a second to clear out.
Thank you. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Hi, how are you? Thanks, everybody.
All right. From people killing mosquitoes to our DPW update. Andy?
I just, one quick thing before we move on. We are one member short. Why is, reorganization not the first thing on our agenda? I understand when the Board of Health was here, but why isn't it the first thing on our agenda?
I don't know. We're just not on the agenda tonight, but we can take it up at the next meeting.
All right, you put together the agenda.
Yeah.
And it was on the agenda, and you took it off the agenda.
Yeah, my thought was we would wait until we had all 5 people here.
So at the end of, till the end of October? we're gonna go without a vice chair?
It could be. I mean, you performed the work when both Starvin and Craig were gone. You were chair. If I'm absent,
I
you
was
could do it.
acting chair. Peter is clerk. We currently don't have a vice chair.
Okay. So,
So we should reorganize.
do you want to make a motion?
Sure.
Okay.
Make a motion, we should reorganize. Well, it's not in the
Yeah,
agenda.
yeah, we should put it on the agenda for the
Yes,
next
I,
meeting.
it should
It
be
needs
on
to
the
be,
agenda.
it should be on the agenda, so we
It
can
should
do
have been
that.
on the agenda tonight. Okay.
All right. Well, Jen, I mean, the agenda was posted on Friday. You could have called me to ask me.
The agenda has changed 3 times since then, so.
Well, that's kind of my point. So, okay. Duly noted. We'll take it up next time. Okay. Okay.
So Disney.
DPW.
How you doing, Andy?
Good evening.
How are you?
Okay. So I'm back. You guys have, there was a.
Yeah, I can
memo-
start.
I'm-
So, I believe everybody on the board got the memo that we sent out with regards to funding options. As I think most people are now aware, the DPW project, is short on funds. Based on, Andy's been here a couple times. We ran into some ledge in the project that caused us to use the majority or all of our contingency that we had set aside for the project. And we have since learned that, the gasoline tanks down at the police department, they will be out of service as of 2021.
End of 2020.
And end of 2020, right. There is some opportunity for us to include that in the DPW project because pumps were going up at the DPW barn anyway. And those tanks do need to be decommissioned and pulled out of the ground by mandate of the Mass EPA. They have a lifespan and those are done. So, we put together some funding options. I'm actually gonna put this on the screen. It's just very simple, breakdown of the options that we had put in the memo to the board, and I believe were also included in the packet. Andy has, read the memo. The building committee has considered, all the options. They, like us, are in favor of option 1, which is asking the town to raise the additional $1 million excluded from the levy, excuse me, at October town meeting. So that would be a tax bill increase, obviously. An additional $1 million is about $10 per year over 20 years. That number is not set in stone. It's based on an estimate of 4.5% for interest, which is very high, but that's what we carry. And, we typically come in under that. And obviously that will change based on values. As home values go up, we hope tax burden goes down for excluded debt. So that option 1 is the option that we are recommending and that the building committee also recommends. The other options are all viable, maybe with the exception of number 4, only because I'm not really sure what we would cut in order to pay for that in the general fund. Number 2, obviously we can try to cobble together funds in October. Free cash will be certified by October town meeting. I don't know what the number is yet, but it will be certified. So we will have some money to raise and appropriate. It looks like new growth is gonna come in a little bit higher than expected, so there will be some raise and appropriate available there. Road stabilization, the town does have the power to vote to change what they wanna spend that money on. That would mean that other projects will be impacted. So the upcoming paving season would be significantly shortened. If we did use those funds, there's no opportunity for us to sort of backfill that with Chapter 90, because all of the Chapter 90 funds that we have been earmarked for specific projects to date. Things like the Westboro Road culvert, the Stowe Road culvert, the Main Street project. So there's not really a lot of room there to use Chapter 90 funds for construction that we would have used road stabilization funds for. And then there is potentially some overlay that could be released. The Board of Assessors has not met yet to vote on it. but the assessor has indicated that there may be some money there as well. So that is obviously an option. It would take, I think, a little bit more time to nail down the details, only because we don't yet know what free cash is. The Board of Assessors hasn't taken a vote, and new growth is not certified, but it's definitely an option. But, you know, for now, funding option number one is definitely what we're recommending. Give the town the option, let them vote, to raise the additional million to fund really the entire project as it was presented. So Andy, that was very long-winded, I apologize, but if you have any other.
That's a good intro. I've said it, I think, before, but just to try to say it clearer again. So this project originally was a bigger project with a bigger price tag, and it got voted down by the town. So the committee decided to pare the building size back and pare the budget back, and to go into this project with a little bit more risk, and say we're going to go with a smaller contingency as well. It's a risk that the town, the committee, the project took to try and keep the cost down on this project, so that it would get approved by the town and we'd be able to go forward. Something like the ledge that we hit certainly was a lot more than we would have expected. The committee is certainly having some discussions about could the design team have given us better information about that ledge? Could we have, it wouldn't have changed the fact that there is ledge there, but perhaps we could have repositioned the building and mitigated some of that. So we haven't come up with a final sort of decision on what to do about that, but we're certainly still talking about the design side of this and where that could lead. Because there was everybody, a lot of people say there's clearly ledge in the area, and so we're looking pretty carefully at the details of that to understand what our options might be there, if any. I will say that the memo spells out, once we hit that ledge and we hit the big change order, we did as a team pull together and come up with a pretty substantial amount of savings to try to get this thing back. And give ourselves some contingency that we could move forward with should anything else come up. So I feel pretty good about how we've been managing the money that we have. I think we've been pretty careful about how we spend it. I think we've been very good with working with the construction team and the design team to keep everything corralled. The big change order notwithstanding. I think we've been pretty careful, and we're going to continue to be careful about how we do that. We do have about a little over $200,000 in contingency in the project right now. Again, that we're gonna only spend if we need to spend it. I know I may have said before that our plan was to spend the contingency on equipment. Our hope is always to have contingency at the end of a project so that we can do something with it. You should never actually plan to use something that you may not have at the end of a project. So I think that's, and again, just the last point, just to be clear, is that the gas pumps were never going to be any less expensive than they would be here. The one thing that the $220,000 number actually has gotten a little bit firmer and still accurate from when I was here last time. We've gotten some more information back from our vendors, and that's a pretty solid number at this point. But again, that was not part of the project. We weren't planning on that cost as part of this project. We designed for the future potential to add that into this project later on if it needed to. So in fact, if we hadn't designed that, the fact that this pump is aging out would have cost the town more money. So, and in fact, that aging out of that pump, you could decide to not do that now, but it's not going to be any less expensive in the future. If we do it while we're putting in the rest of the infrastructure for this building, this is as cheap as we'll get it. So I think that's it. That's what I've got.
Okay, any questions from the board?
I have a couple questions. Hi, Andy. Thanks for coming in.
Sure.
So I just want a little more clarification on the gas pumps. So that was gonna be my question, what you were saying. So it would be more expensive to put them in at the old police station, potentially? Is that what you're saying? Or about the same cost?
We haven't even looked at putting them back in the
Back
same
in it,
location.
okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, go
so my first question would be, is it an and/or? So if we have them at the DPW, we're not gonna be putting them back in the police station, okay?
Right.
And then if it's $220,000, let's assume it would be the same amount if we didn't put it in the DPW project, and we decided at a later time, just as an option, to have it back at the old police station. Would there be any other funding sources available?
Not right now that we're aware of.
Okay.
We would have to go to a town meeting,
Okay,
and look at either raising it, free cash, stabilization. It would probably
much
end up
the
on
same.
to be honest, on a capital plan.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
where it would end up.
yeah, okay.
The other thing I'll note, I'm not sure if it's really germane or not, but the DPW probably is the department in the town that uses the least amount of gasoline.
Right,
Oddly enough, you know, they
Yeah.
use mostly
Right.
diesel.
right.
But it probably still makes some sense to cluster it with the diesel.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking.
But no, it's a good, fair
Yeah,
point. I don't
yeah.
think don't actually think that we had looked at just replacing it right where it is.
Right. No, it makes sense. I mean, you know, the ledging, I understand. Really can't change that
Right.
at this point. But you know, the only room we would have to change is the gas pump. So.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I do have a question. So, being on CIPC now for almost over 8 years, I've never seen the gas tanks ever on any capital plan. This was actually the first time I've heard of it, and the other ones, I believe we had some oil tanks, I think, outside in the back of the municipal center, and we had some at the schools. Those were put on a capital plan, and we dealt with those. And so I understand, you know, through efficiencies, and I get all that. But in light of asking, you know, the town for another $1 million, is there any other fund that we could perhaps utilize to offset this instead of asking for $1 million? And if we happen to have money left over that we don't use, that we can end up going back and maybe transferring that back in?
Are you asking specifically about the tanks, or just about the entire project?
Just about the entire
amount.
project. I mean, the equipment and the funds and the paving the site, that I understand, but the tank thing to me is like, it's the sore thumb, right?
Right.
So,
It's not related to it's really not specifically related to this project. It's just that we did design for the
Correct.
eventuality to happen. But yeah, I mean, it's a standalone piece if you wanted it to be.
Yeah, we reached out to the state, to Representative Meridian and Senator Moore about grant opportunities through the department, the State Department of Environmental Protection, because they're the ones that mandate it. You know, the tanks have a lifespan. This tank is underground. It's a certain thickness. They say, you know, it's at the end of its lifespan. You got to bring it up, or you got to adjust the thickness of the tank. They did not come back with any options for us with respect to grants. Capital is probably the road that we would go down if we were to leave it, if we were to not include it in the additional $1 million. If we were to cut the tanks out, it would end up on a capital plan either next year or the following year. So,
Are there any other funds you're thinking of?
well, yeah, there's one in particular. It's probably not going to be a very popular one, but, you know, a few years ago, we transferred a large sum of cash from one project into the, you know, the super park, the eventuality that we're going to build a super park, but that was put on hold as a result of the completion of the library. And in my opinion, if that money's just sitting there and we're not going to be building any super park like any time soon, you know, until the library's finished, why wasn't any consideration, you know, thought of maybe utilizing some of that money instead of asking for the 1 million, maybe using 220,000 of that money that we transferred, not the donated money, to fund the removal of the gas pumps, and then, you know, still make it the 1 million. Okay, so instead of asking for 1 million borrow, we ask for, you know, 780. And then, if we do have money left over from the project, then we consider moving it back into that. It just, to me, it's asking, you know, taxpayers, I know we looked at $10 per year over 20 years, you know, we need 2/3 vote, we don't have to go out to to a ballot to go out and borrow the money, but I think it kind of shows that we're trying to utilize some other funds that we're not currently using right now. So I just didn't know, if that could be a consideration, because it kind of meets some things halfway, in my opinion.
I mean, it's an available funding source right now. I do know that the Recreation and a few members of the Super Park Committee have gotten together. They're actually looking at putting together a new design and getting together some engineering preliminarily to look at the site and how it lays out with respect to the library parking lot. We've reached out to the state on the library project itself to talk about what the impact of the funding for that project would be if we were to start looking at the Super Park now, and whether or not that would impact the grant that we got, because there are some pretty specific rules that you have to adhere to when you get the grant. So Tim did make a few phone calls last week to Meridian and Moore on that to get more information. Don't know. I haven't heard anything yet. But I do know that, the Super Park is not a stale project by any means. It's still being regularly talked about, both internally and by members of the committee. I think that if the board wanted to consider that option, they should certainly think about talking to that committee
Of course,
beforehand.
it's just a consideration.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
not
it
set on
is a available sum of money
Yeah.
that the town meeting could vote on, certainly.
And, if things all line up to, the completion of the project and there is some residual money, then perhaps the board considers at a future date to then transfer such funds to replenish it, not to, say, do away with it altogether. But we're a couple of years away, and personally, I don't see why you would start designing something before you see a finished product that's on that lot until the library's finished, because what if there is a change order and you did the design work and then there was some structural changes or to the way the layout is, and then you're gonna be throwing out majority of that design and going back to the drawing board and spending more money. So I just wanna know the cart before the horse and just consideration of that. I think the safest route, in my opinion, if I was project managing this, I would wait till the library's built and the footprint's done, then go to design, but that's just what I would do.
Sure. Well, I can speak to it because we have been working on it. We actually did make application to CPC, but we're gonna wait until the spring to bring it to town meeting. We have been doing a lot of work on it, and why not? There's a lot of reasons about, we've had all those discussions. But there are also advantages of doing the work at the same time that the work at the library is being done. You don't wanna build a brand new parking lot and then run machinery over it to build a super park. So there's definitely coordination there. So we are working on it. It is not a stale project. We actually just have gotten it going again. And so certainly, we can vote on moving that money, but it would have to go to town meeting and it would need a 2/3 vote to move it out of that account.
I think the other thing that's worth looking at is, and I think I know the answer, but I think just looking at what would it cost to replace what's there in place is certainly that's an easy thing to track down. I think it's going to be about the same because what we're putting in the DPW location is basically a new thing in that location. I don't see why it would be different where it is right now. The controls and everything else that come along with that would all have to be new. I know that everything related to that pump right now is definitely too old, but it's still worth looking at to make sure. Just another box to check off, right? So I'll take that on to make sure that we take a look and see what would it cost to replace it in its current location. I think that's a piece of information you would want to have.
My question is either for Andy or Becca. I wanted to do this research before I came in today, so I wouldn't have to ask this question, but I didn't have a chance to. So I'm a little bit confused about where we draw the line on what we assume we can use Chapter 90 funds for.
Yeah.
Are other people similarly confused about that? I want to know how we made the assumption that we could use them, and then when it turned out we couldn't use them, what was the rationale?
Right. So we have talked to the folks at the state that mandate this stuff and have asked, like, can you use it for this? Because we were looking at, can you use it for equipment? And I'm not the expert on it, so I couldn't give you the best answer in the world. Although I know it needs to be directly related to roads in a layman's term. I can get you a better definition than that. But there is a pretty there is a pretty discrete list of things that you can and can't use it for. Paving of roadways, we had thought that the DPW, the asphalt around the DPW should be close enough. We're not paving the school parking lot. We'd thought that it's directly related to DPW use, but it turns out they said no.
Okay.
So that was our working assumption was, hey, this is, if we don't have that, we can't roll trucks out onto the road, so it's gotta be about the same, but they were a little tighter than that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Irene Hool, 68 Carroll Road. Do you want me up there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Irene Hool, 68 Carroll Road. Andy, this is probably a really bizarre question, but is there any chance, there's a lot of talk about regionalization, would we be able to, could we approach Sutton or Millbury or Upton or even Westboro about using their gas facilities to gas up our vehicles? That's all. Like I said, I know it's kind of bizarre, but would that be a possibility, and what would the cost of that be? Because I'm assuming even if we, let's say, did go that route, we're still going to have to decommission or deactivate the existing tanks.
I can give you a different answer than the answer to your question, which is some towns use gas cards.
Okay.
So some DPWs or some other town departments don't have their own gas pumping facility at all, and they just use gas cards. So that's a different way to look at this, right?
We've looked at that.
Okay, my question to you, Becca, is can you still negotiate a similar rate than what we pay per gallon?
Yeah, so part of the issue with that is that we buy gasoline at a group purchasing rate with a bunch of other towns. We get a really, really good deal. We don't pay taxes on it. We could send the guys up to Flynn's or whatever, but in the long run, it would end up costing the town a lot more, I think. We haven't looked at it really specifically because for a long time, we've been, purchasing gas regionally and getting a great price on it. None of our surrounding towns that are part of the regional purchasing use it. But we can certainly look into it, in more detail if it's something the board would want more detail on.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so I take it there's no formal action required of the board at this point.
Yeah, there's no vote needed. I mean, we just wanted to present all of the options, if there were other options that you all thought of that we could look more into. We do need to we have to put something on the October town meeting warrant because DPW is scheduled to be in the building in January.
Okay.
So we've got to make a decision one way or the other, but the warrant is not scheduled to be signed until mid to late September, so we can certainly discuss it again on the 3rd, or if the board felt like they knew what they wanted to do tonight, we could make that decision as well.
If town meeting says no, what's the backup plan?
Great question. We looked at the list of equipment to say, can we prioritize? Is there something we can do without? The things that might fall onto that part of the list don't really move the needle. It's the bigger things like, vehicle lifts to get trucks up off the ground to be serviced. Those are all the things that really make up the lion's share of the cost. If the town said no, we'd see what if anything we had at the end of the project, and we'd figure out how to make do with not a lot. But it would be really tough to have a building where these guys couldn't maintain their own vehicles. We'd get part of the way there with the mission, right? We'd get them out of the weather.
Right, well, that was half the point of building the thing to begin with.
Right,
was
yes.
So we can maintain our own vehicles.
100%, I agree.
It wouldn't be we wouldn't move into the building, I don't think. I mean, it wouldn't be a viable option for the department without, the equipment and then the paving of the site. These are things that are very much part of the project that are needed for, the department to function wholly.
Yep.
You can put an option on, you can put a secondary option on, so if one fails, you sort of have different levels or options for people. If they all failed, you'd probably come back again, call a special town meeting and try to educate more and get more people out, because we really don't, I mean,
Right.
they're all necessary pieces of the project.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we really have taken a close look to see what we could do if, you know, if we had to just cut stuff out, but it'd be pretty difficult to do anything meaningful in terms of taking some of the costs out of this.
Okay.
I agree, that's the way we bought this building out was in pieces so that we could stay within the budget. So this could potentially be the same way. You could break it out between equipment, paving, and gas pumps if we did.
And remember, we've already funded the salt shed with Chapter 90 money. $500,000 of the project already came out. And that's where some of that Chapter 90 got sucked up. So there is none of that. Yep.
So personally, I'd like to attend the next rec board meeting and just ask them to see if it's something that they could consider to help offset what we're asking at town meeting. I think town will be more apt to do a transfer from one account to another because it's not it's not impacting their tax rate. But at the same time, I think it's worth just asking, just see how, where they stand on that. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I'd rather ask around and see other departments first and see if they're willing to help out. And then if that doesn't work, then obviously we go to town meeting for the full $1 million and hope for the best. And, and then to your point, we're gonna have to plan for the worst and figure out
Right.
plan B.
Yep.
So
There is one, actually, I just thought, there is one other source, but we don't know for sure whether or not we're gonna be able to use it. And that is the money that was set aside to do the LED light conversion in May, that we held out in the event that we did not get the Green Communities grant, because we always knew that we wanted to move forward with the conversion one way or the other. We have not heard from Green Communities yet, so we don't know if we got the grant, but we should have heard by now, but we haven't yet. So I expect any day that we will. If we do get the grant, that does free up that $125,000 roughly that is currently sitting in an article. So we don't know for sure because we don't know about the grant. So a lot of this is going to be about timing, but it's another thing that we can, consider.
I called the state on that today,
Yeah.
and September is when we're going to hear.
Any specific time in September?
September
Right.
is what I got. So,
1st?
yeah,
All right.
September 1st. So, no, that would be an excellent solution.
Yeah. So but we can certainly ask members of that committee and recreation to come in and talk about it. Super fun.
or I could just go to the meeting and at their next meeting and just ask them.
Okay. Yeah.
Save a cycle or two. I know, more than one of us works on that committee, so it would be something I think just worth asking. So.
Last thing for me, if there's ever any question about the how the money's being spent in this project, we have it's extremely transparent. It's your money, so I'm watching every penny, every dollar. If anybody ever has any questions about where this started, where it is, where it's going, I'm happy to be available and to walk anybody through the gory detail.
Andy, I think you just were on a challenging site, and I think it just got more challenging when you took the first couple feet down. So and I think that's where the crux of I think all of this is.
Right. I think we took a risk to try and keep in. We didn't, and that didn't pan out. I think that's where we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So I'm assuming we're going to revisit this in about 2 weeks.
Yes.
So, okay.
Next up, Fire Study Committee update.
Good evening.
Good evening. What do you have for us?
I got Rick Lane, Captain, Station 3, and retired firefighter Roger Curry. My name's Ray Mead. I think everybody knows me, so. I just wanted to update the board on the Fire Study Committee. We've had 4 meetings. We meet every 2 weeks. We've had 4 meetings, and we've gone through an enormous amount of information. Everybody has that report, 250 pages. There's a lot of information there. Some of it's just fluff and puff, and some of it, and a lot of it is good information. So what we've done so far is we've come up with a list of priorities, and that was actually a part of our charge, was to come up with a list of priorities. Now we're going to take this list of priorities and we're going to put definitions and plans to each one of these priorities. I think the board has them. I asked Cindy to put them in your packet, but I'll just go through them very quickly. The number one is organizational structure, management, and administration. That's the number one issue that we find within the report and also within the committee. Staffing, recruitment, and retention is number two. Currently, I know that 3 or 4 got put on. I mean,
Three just got put on.
Three guys are.
We'll be going
I don't want to say guys, but 3 firefighters just got appointed. And that's great because no one's been appointed in quite a while, but we found that to be the second priority. Training, major priority, which we, debated whether that's going to be higher on the list or lower on the list. It's number 3. It's pretty higher up. Emergency operations is number 4. Fire prevention is number 5, and fire prevention would take up part of the inspection process, but also fire prevention in the schools and training and education and things like that. Mission, vision, and value statement, that made it to number 6. Number 7, the GFD table of organization, and now that would be, this table of organization would start with the chief and come all the way down. And we'll put together a table of organization that we'll present to the board, and that will tell everyone what we feel the department needs as far as an organizational standard. Community risk assessment, that was one of the big things in the report itself, because Grafton has considerable community risk issues within the town. Wyman Gordon's, the Grafton Inn was noticed, large buildings that are unsprinkled and issues like that, even the schools. Fiscal forecasting and capital planning is pretty far down on the list. But that's gonna come into account very quickly. So, I know, Becky, you probably think it should be way up here. We put it way down there because there are other priorities, but that will come into view very quickly. And then the comparative analysis of facilities and apparatus. So we will put together a plan for the facilities and also the apparatus. We've had, as I said, 4 meetings. It's a great committee. A lot of great ideas. It is going to take some time, and I know we have a charge of 6 months, but it is going to take some time to put all of this together, because there's an enormous amount of information and there's an enormous amount of discussion that goes on each one of these items at our meetings. So I'm not asking to extend the charge, and we will do our best to finish it within 6 months by January. But as I said, we'll come back to the board with a plan for each one of these items and present it to you guys, and then you guys can move from there. But one thing that came up last night at our meeting, and this is something that we did not discuss within our plan and within actually the organizational structure and management, we never discussed the position of an inspector. And right now we have an inspector that works 12 hours a week. How much longer he's going to work that 12 hours a week, I have no idea. I know Ricky's been filling in. Eric Matthews has been filling in. A couple of the guys have been filling in to do inspections. One thing that we cannot do is go without an inspector. We need an inspector ASAP. And I know that the gentleman who was interviewed and chosen declined the position. We can't wait weeks and months for an inspector. That affects, and a lot of people don't understand it, that affects house closings. If you can't get an inspection on your house before you close, your closing gets put off. The schools right now are being inspected prior to school opening. But that's, to walk through a school and do a full inspection, that can be 1-2 days, depending on the size of the school and which school it is. So that's something that, and Becca, I'm directing this to you, that and the board, that's something that we need right away. So that's not even in our organizational discussions that we've had? Because we just assumed that was gonna be taken care of. So that's what the board, that's what the committee discussed last night, and, that's what we'd like to see happen right away.
So Becca, where are we with that? Are we back to square one?
Well, yeah, I mean, we were in the middle of the negotiations with a candidate who is very well qualified, was a Cohen inspector in a town north of us. He had personal matters come up last minute and sent an email Friday afternoon declining the position. So he was on the agenda, up until, I think, the First Amendment of the agenda, let me find out. So we had fully planned on appointing somebody tonight to the fire inspector position. We're well aware of the backlog. We get phone calls on it a lot. I know that the members of the department are trying really hard to step in when Steve's not available. He can only work so many hours because he's retired. Town of Westboro is helping us out a little bit, their fire department, and trying to fill in a little bit. You know, but unfortunately, we're back at square one, and based on the last conversation I had with the chief, he wants to re-advertise and start over.
Okay.
So do you have a question?
Yeah, so part of the problem with Westboro and people like that, and I'm going back to school, so I'm unavailable as of Friday to help fill in, is the scheduling part of it. So they try to schedule with the people between the hours of 9 and 12 on the days that Steve can be there. And then they turn to Westboro, whatever, can you do this, can you do that? Well, no, we're doing our hours, so we can't fit. It becomes a very, very difficult thing. So, like you said last night when we discussed it, you know, this is a big priority that has to happen. And it's been going on for a long time, since February 27th till now, and now we have no candidate.
There isn't like a second resume or another person that was interviewed, or?
There were other candidates that were interviewed. I did ask the chief if he wanted to bring those people back in, and he did state that he wished to re-advertise. So,
Okay.
I do know that the candidate that we were looking at, I believe, was the only candidate who was a fire inspector, who was already doing the job. So, we will take the chief's recommendation and start the process again. Hopefully it goes much quicker than it did this last time around. We understand it's a priority for the residents, the board, the committee, so certainly we'll do that.
Anything else?
That's it.
I'm gonna add, coming out of Mr. Mead's mouth, this report isn't gonna be 250 pages
Oh,
long.
no.
Before you go, Roger, so if you recall, the reason why we asked them to be here was the memo that I'd sent back on July 16th. And I know some of the board members here may have had some questions with regards to what we thought at the time were three very big priorities that we felt couldn't wait for the final report to come out. So I don't know if you guys recall that memo, but that was one of the primary reasons why we called upon the committee to come out tonight. So I just want to make sure that we covered all the bases about why we invited you out here on Tuesday night.
Yep.
Right. We believe that that priority list is what we're working on, and that, and again, we could change some of that as well, and we would let you know that, but some of that priorities, some of those things down the bottom will actually start happening when some of the top stuff gets put in place.
Right.
Sure.
So, you know,
Yep.
that's why we put it down low, because we figured as soon as you have these people in place, a lot of that stuff's gonna just move right up automatically.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ray, when's your next meeting and the location for people?
It is, I don't know, we had to roam around like,
Nomads.
looking for a room last night, hang on.
A little hot here at night. 9th.
It's the 9th,
September 9th?
the
at
9th and the
7?
9th and the 23rd at 7 o'clock. And we're usually in the school department,
Conference room on the second floor.
the room on the second floor.
Are you guys, because this room's not available or the FinCom room is not available?
We don't know, that's what
Oh,
we,
okay.
that's what we got set up, so.
Oh, okay, because the board, because our policy is if these rooms are available, it should be in there to be taped, right?
Yeah, I don't know, but something happened last night with the school department room, I'm not sure what
Yeah,
happened.
so, I mean, we've had some challenges getting rooms and stuff, but
Yeah.
that room in particular is conducive to what we needed. It's got a large whiteboard for us as.
Yeah, the whiteboard works
As
out
its
real well.
whiteboard's been instrumental for us as we are putting ideas, we're taking images of these ideas, and that way we're keeping notes and tracking about, how this plan is being developed. The other conference rooms, I mean, They really don't have those facilities.
Themselves to that either, no.
Yeah, the only other room that we could use that would work really well is the EOC down at the police station.
Yes.
That would work out very well, with all the whiteboards that are down there. We talked about that last night, but I didn't call Norm, so.
Okay.
But that's, the whiteboards, as they said, the whiteboards work out very well.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
okay?
Okay, thanks,
Great.
guys.
Thank
Thank you.
All right. 8:25 and we finished 3 things, so let's roll.
Send this out of order. Put some of these people in here.
Well, we just got resignations for election workers. What do we got for resignations?
Oh,
Let's see. Candy LaValley Town. Yeah, Candy LaValley Town Clerk would like the Select Board to accept her request to have the following election worker removed from her list of active members: Thomas Pond, Sharon Ward, and Jane Barabin. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board vote to remove the following election workers from the town clerk's list of active members: Thomas Pond, Sharon Ward, and Jane Barabin as election workers.
Motion made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Appointments. Name Select Board Representative on the following: DPW Building Committee and Affordable Housing Trust. So, let's do, who do we want to sit on the DPW? Let's do that one first.
I could do that,
All right.
if the board will have it.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board vote to appoint Peter Carlson as the Select Board Representative on the DPW Building Committee.
Motion made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Congrats, Pete. Number 2, we're looking for someone to sit as representative on the Affordable Housing Trust. I will say that if no one wants to do it, Bruce Spinney did mention that he would be happy to continue being the board's representative on the committee. I know we've done that from time to time in other instances, but so that's an option.
I'll do it.
All right. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chair, I motion that we appoint Jen Thomas as Select Board Representative on the Affordable Housing Trust Committee.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Jen is on the Affordable Housing Trust. Okay, moving on to appointments. Board of Registrar. Carl Parisi recently submitted his citizens activity form noting his interest in serving as a registrar of voters. Candy Valley Town Clerk reached out to Mr. Parisi, and after discussing the responsibilities, she feels he will be a good fit. I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to appoint Carl Parisi as Register of Voters for the town of Grafton.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Congratulations, Mr. Parisi. And we have a new item on the agenda that was recently added. The planning board is requesting legal assistance for the review of the cell tower application submitted by Crown Castle at 84 Snow Road, rear. Therefore, they're asking that the select board vote to appoint Miaris Harrington as special counsel for the planning board. Mr. Layden.
Hi.
Hi.
So pretty much straightforward. We're dealing with an application from the planning board that's very technical as far as telecommunications law. And there are arguments being made by the applicant as well as an abutter, an existing tower that's owned by American Tower, who then has the existing facility at 20 Indian Path. Crown Castle wants to move it to 84 rear. One of the arguments they're stating within the public hearing process is that it's uneconomical for the carriers. This is sort of a nuance within telecommunications law and involves recent regulations that changed at the beginning of the year. We're looking for special counsel to assist in drafting and sort of understanding the issues and then assisting to draft a decision. The decisions for the planning board fall on my shoulders. And in this instance, we're looking at potentially appeal one way or the other, whether we appeal it or deny it. And this request is of value for the board. The board did vote 2 meetings ago to request council, and because town council felt that it was so specific,
Right.
they recommended outside counsel.
All right. I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to appoint Marius Harrington as special counsel to the planning board for the purpose to engage cell tower licensing. Is that just for that purpose?
To assist the planning board in its public hearing on a cell tower application.
To assist the planning board on its public hearing for the cell tower application. Thank you.
I second the motion.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Mr. Layton. Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business. Historic District Commission, common brick pavers.
So I'm Bill Nicholson. I'm the chair of the Historic District Commission, and this is Brad Schleichback. And, you know, I've got some handouts for you too. I think Paul Scarlett sent these to you, but in case you didn't have a chance to open up the email, that looks like that's the same thing, but this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's the same.
I'll always take handouts.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks, Bill.
So now there was some talk about concerns about brick after I think maybe 2 meetings ago. So I just wanted to address those concerns. Just and quickly, of course, we did approve brick at the town meeting, as you're aware, and it is an ADA approved product, assuming that it's installed correctly, as ours will be, with an adequate foundation of at least 18 inches. It might be deeper than that. And the not only ADA, but the Architectural Access Board is apparently, of Massachusetts, is apparently considering changing their guidelines for installation. And so what we propose to do is to actually install the brick, exceeding what is now the current standard, which would mean lining them up in direction of travel. So rather than go as you're facing them, rather than having to go horizontally, they go vertically, if you will. So that minimizes the disruption if you're in a wheelchair or a walker, apparently. So we plan on doing it that way, and on top of that, brick is a very, very low maintenance product. It's really less maintenance than concrete or asphalt, which are both not historically appropriate materials. So, and I've got, there's a lot more that we can go into if you like. But do you have, I guess I'd like to know what your concerns are.
Yeah, my concerns, we had a study done in Grafton, and we had a gentleman here who was in a wheelchair who was very adamant about any type of pavers, not just brick, but anything that involves even just non-mortar set in place. And town doesn't have policy on what it would want to see up there. And if you go up to the Grafton Common, and you talk about historical relevance, for example, we have stamped concrete in front of one Grafton Common, we have asphalt, and then we have concrete walkways. And we had just a brand new concrete walkway installed 2-3 weeks ago, a 30-foot extension from the Civil War monument out to
Right,
front of
notice
the
it, yeah.
Common. Right. So I won't get into the arguments over what's historically relevant. I'm more concerned, and I brought this to the board's attention, and we just want to understand that we have a report that came out that was said, please don't use pavers for people in wheelchairs or who have accessibility issues, and that we're also had a brief discussion. We wanted to bring you in here is that we understand pavers require more maintenance over time. They're not maintenance free, and just how that was evaluated with the decision. I know you at town meeting. I was there. I heard the arguments. I heard Mr. Yeomans, get up and speak, really against just the use of brick, but town meeting did approve it. But in light of the study that we just afforded with a grant, I just want to know what your responses are to that gentleman who's in a wheelchair.
Well, if you think about other surface materials like asphalt and the roads, we can all think of roads that are perfect and that maybe were paved in the last few years, and roads that are terrible, that have potholes and all kinds of breaks in the surface. So you can't really compare, a brick that was installed 30 years ago and to something that's going to be brand new with screen cut, highest quality brick that's professionally installed. That's 18 or 24-inch foundation that probably won't move in decades and decades. Now I realize that tree roots can play a role, and they probably will, but actually brick is vastly superior to concrete or asphalt in terms of repairs, because you can just pull out the bricks, the 6, 8, 10, 20, whatever that are being affected. You dig out a little bit of sand and put them right back, and they're nice and flat. Whereas if you've got roots pulling up concrete or asphalt, you've got to get in there and excavate it all out and pour new concrete. So it's a lot more expensive and time consuming. So brick really makes more sense in terms of maintenance, and if it is AD approved. I mean, that gentleman, I watched that piece on the from that meeting, and he didn't, as I recall, he didn't actually say it's not legal, it's not approved, it's just I don't prefer it. And we don't know, there's no way of knowing, any of us, what his experiences were. Maybe he went over he's had experiences running over brick that's 50 years old and has never been repaired, I mean, if you go to Nantucket, they haven't touched their sidewalks in decades and decades, and they have all kinds of roots pulling them up because they just have so many miles of it, they don't bother. But I mean, I talked to the people in Salem, Mass, which is, as you know, is a very old community, and also Newburyport. They still use brick. They still put down new sidewalks with brick. So it's an ADA approved product, and the way we're going to do it, and Mr. Duchesne back there is going to help us with this project. It's going to be done right, and I think that gentleman is going to find that it's a great surface to roll a walker or a wheelchair on, and really is not much different than asphalt or concrete would be.
Another question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So the brick that was put in over at One Grafton Common, which I believe was done within the past 8-10 years,
Oh,
the loose brick pavers, the ones in the back, not in the front, not the concrete.
Yeah.
Those have been impacted by frost heaves, not by roots or anything like that. So are you saying that this new product prevents frost heaves from lifting and making dips into those loose?
I don't know anything about how that was installed. I mean, I put in a brick patio myself, and I dug down, I think, 13 or 14 inches, and it never moved a
So
centimeter.
let's assume it was done right,
But
and it was done in accordance with historic's guidance. Everything was approved, right? So here I am. I see that clear as day.
for one thing, they were installed differently. They go laterally, if you will, if you're facing them, so ours won't be going that way. And I'm not, I looked at those the other day. I didn't notice them as being, bumpy, but, that shouldn't happen.
So, am I understanding that depending upon whether they're laid laterally or horizontally, they're adverse to frost heaves?
It has nothing to do with frost heaves. No, it's just in terms of the people that are handicapped in terms of their ability to.
And I just want to also state too, I agree that the gentleman who's here did not state that there was some legal or anything like that. It's just when you have a man whose profession is going around and evaluating and pointing out these things, I just want to make sure we cover our bases one more time.
Right.
Before we go ahead and go down this road and say, oh, now that we thought about it, maybe there is an alternative that we could do that would be more applicable to people who are impacted by the use of wheelchairs.
Could I read a couple paragraphs from this report by the page 2, which is from the brick industry? about accessible clay brick pavements. It says it is important to maintain the proper perspective when evaluating existing brick paving systems that were designed and constructed prior to the advent of or without regard to ADA standards. Such pavements were never intended to perform as accessible pavements. This is true for all pavement categories, and including segmental or monolithic and other paving systems. Obviously, whether accessible or not, older paving systems should undergo maintenance or repairs to ensure that they meet both old and new performance requirements. Older pavements that have not yet received proper maintenance should not be expected to meet accessibility requirements. And I had to assume that gentleman that gave his opinion about bricks, that probably some of his experiences have been with, older installations that weren't designed to today's standards. And I'd really like to know more about the walkway behind One Grafton Common. Andy, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, that was part of the project that I managed to put that in. I mean, there was nothing extraordinary about.
Andy, you might want to come up, thank you.
Andy Duchesne, 13 Meadowbrook Road. So I was the project manager on that project. There was nothing extraordinary about that sidewalk in the back. I don't remember it receiving any particularly extra underlayment. I think it was done sort of. They stripped off the loam and put down sand, and that was it. So, and I don't know what you're planning on doing on the common, but that was all that was done back there. I don't think anything was done to really stabilize a foot down or anything like that. It was
We're talking
pretty
about a minimum of
straightforward.
18 inches.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a little bit different.
Yeah, and, so, anyway.
Any further questions?
We don't.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, looks like
Oh, yeah.
audience.
Yeah, why don't you come on up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a few thoughts and a question that might even be for Andy, but the first thing is the gentleman that was here, the terminology he used was not that he didn't prefer them. His words stuck in my mind very well on this point. He said they are a nightmare. And someone that does that as a profession, he says he avoids them at all costs, even if they're brand new. And he did say they are, on paper, ADA compliant, but he finds them a nightmare for himself and many other people that are handicapped that he knows. So that was a very concerning point that I heard. The other point in question is that CPC funds cannot be used to do any ongoing maintenance. So where you say that if something does happen on it, this is going to be a lot of area for the pavers. What plan do we have in place, and how much of a budget is going to cost on a yearly basis? I don't know if I'm not asking for exact dollars, but to actually maintain these bricks on the year-to-year basis.
Well, we feel that this is the sort of thing that would probably have to be done every few years, maybe every 3 or 4 or 5 years. Do you agree with him? I mean, I think there's going to be work every year. I mean, there's no way of knowing, really.
Yeah, and my concern is that especially if the ones behind the common right now have some frost heaving going on, is when they were installed correctly, they're not that old, and we're planning to plant new trees on the common with this project as well, to make trees. Granted, we don't anticipate the roots being an issue right away, but they could theoretically cause issues.
Yeah,
After every few months or a year, like after the frost, that might be a thing that could become an issue for ADA compliance or people on the common, and that would be a concern I would have.
Okay.
I just wanted to raise it.
Well,
Thank you, Mr.
the
Chair.
frost really should not be an issue. Really shouldn't. Trees definitely will be. I don't think there's any doubt of it, and they will be with if concrete was used or asphalt. The roots are always going to be an issue.
So I just have one more thing to add. So I understand that this was vetted at town meeting, and this is what the town chose to put bricks down. Per these discussions and the fact that we have a new disability commission back in place, I would maybe make the recommendation to come before the disability commission. We'll probably have a meeting in the next month or so. It's a pretty enthusiastic group, and maybe just talk through some additional concerns that they may have, again, with the understanding that this is what the community voted for, but maybe we can come to some sort of agreement.
Sure,
Okay.
no, that's fine.
Okay.
We'll be happy to. We plan on working with them.
Yeah, great.
So we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Just one more question, and this really has to do outside, so is there a long-term plan that you have for any and all of the walkways, up in that area, in the Grafton Common District?
Not sure I follow you. What do you
What's your long-term strategy? Because I pointed out there's 3 different types of surfaces up there, and I've heard 2 of which are not historically relevant, but yet they're there. There's concrete and there's asphalt up there. So my question is, in regards to any of the future work that's done up in One Grafton Commons, so when I saw the sidewalk put in, I thought, oh, that looks really nice, but is that meeting what your vision is from a historic district's perspective?
One Grafton Common?
Not One Grafton Common. Grafton Common in general.
Oh, the entire area.
Including
No, this
all the
project
public
is really just the common. We haven't addressed the sidewalks that surround it. It's just the common.
But would it be fair to say that if sidewalks were to be redone tomorrow, let's say in front of the library, that you would consider using pavers that were historically relevant? Or would you recommend and agree that poured concrete, the way it is today, is adequate?
Peter, we just haven't discussed that. I mean, I'd have to speak with the other commissioners. I mean, I couldn't give you an answer.
Okay.
It's never come up.
That's all.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next item on our agenda, Blue Wave Pilot Agreements, Payment in lieu of Taxes Agreement, 43 Estabrook Ave, BWC Lake Ripple LLC.
So this is a pilot agreement for 43 and 44 Estabrook Ave. If you recall, a few months ago, the board did vote on the right of first refusal for these 2 properties. They came out of chapter land. We opted not to purchase them, knowing that, the board wasn't interested, and also that they were planning to put a solar field on that property. It's approximately 15.5 acres in size. They plan to generate 2 megawatts of electricity. We negotiated a deal of $12,500 per megawatt, so that's $25,000 a year for 20 years. It's pretty standard. Most of our pilots are 12.5 per megawatt. If you have specific questions, Mary is here. She can answer them with respect to how the taxing of the property works. But this is pretty standard, and from what we've learned, it's actually pretty good compared to what other communities are getting for per megawatt, just because the load is increasing and the credits are decreasing, so, companies aren't getting as much as they were.
I do have one specific question that leads to a general question, if you don't mind, real quick. Hi, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. I was just checking out Schedule B on Exhibit B on the annual payments. So the agreement would start in 2019. The rate per megawatt is 12.5. Payment based on a system size of 2.0 megawatts is $25,000 annually. And then when I read, calculation of adjustment, it states that should the land increase in value per the assessment, there would be a renegotiation of the payments. Am I reading that correctly?
No, it shouldn't have any, which one are you looking at?
Sure.
Because it should not have anything to do with the land value itself.
Okay, let me read this part, so just so I understand. Calculation of adjustment is on page 3, section 3. If the developer adds new personal property to the project or replaces existing personal property, and if such personal property increases the value of the project, so they have to add something.
Basically, it's just for the solar units themselves. It
Gotcha,
has nothing
okay.
to do with the land, because once they pull that permit on the land,
Mm-hmm.
that value is instantly going to increase.
Oh, okay.
It's coming out of back residual land.
Okay.
Which I have valued probably about 150,000 right now for the total acreage that they're pulling out. It will actually go up to $1.1 million.
Okay. Okay.
Which we will tax at 1.1 million.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
So if they did decide to add new solar panels and they were generating more than 2 megawatts,
Right.
that clause gives us the ability to basically charge them for those additional megawatts. It's a because in the agreement, it says 25,000 a year, but that's based on 2 megawatts. So if they start generating more, we get to start billing them more.
Does it happen every so often that we renegotiate these things? I know we just did one with Tufts a couple of years ago where they,
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when there are extenuating circumstances, like the company changes hands or something like that, we'll re-enter negotiations with the new company, but, you know, unless they approach us or something changes about the land or the location, we don't
stuck.
go back to them.
yeah, okay. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Any other questions?
I just have one more question for Becca. So this property, this is the one across the street from the Adams Road location where there's been some flooding issues. Is that where that sits?
I don't know if it's that field. I know
Is
I
it
know
that
it's
field?
on.
It's on Estabrook. Is
Yeah.
it on the end of Estabrook there?
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's on the other end of it.
It's in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Are you
Thank
from
you.
Blue
I'm
Wave?
with Blue Wave.
Oh,
Oh, great. Thank
Sorry.
you. So my question was just gonna be if it would have any effect on that issue, but since it's not their property, it won't, so, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to authorize the chairman to sign the agreement for payment of taxes for personal property with BWC Lake Whipple LLC Blue Wave Solar.
Motion made. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Mary.
coming out.
Okay, item C, call special election for a select board member. So obviously, we are a person down. Becca, can you walk us through how this would work? Should we
Sure.
Vote in the affirmative.
So, Article 3 of the charter states that if a vacancy occurs, the remaining members may call a special election, or if you fail to do that, a request of 200 registered voters can also do that. So I talked to the clerk a little bit, sort of about what she needs in preparation. She needs about 65 days between the date you call it and the date she can hold the election. Mass General Law requires that certified papers for candidates are turned in 49 days prior to the actual election. So that means that if you call it 65 days from today, which ends up being like 3 days after October town meeting, people would only have about 16 days to get the nomination papers together and get them into the clerk.
Okay.
She has to have the ballot printed up, and that takes time. So, you know, if you call it today, the earliest you can call it is October 24th. That would be the date. Candy would prefer, you know, a little extra time, particularly for those candidates who want to put in their name. The more time you can give, the bigger the window they'll have to gather votes and so forth. But any day after October 24th.
Okay.
Question. Do we have a November election this year?
No.
For the state of it? Okay.
Good question.
Yeah.
Good thinking,
That
Mr.
would,
Carlson.
that would have been, because I,
That would have been convenient.
That would have been really great.
it would have been
No,
really
I'm like,
convenient, yeah.
wait a minute.
It also
Take a break.
costs about $10,000
Yeah.
to hold a special
I
election.
assume we'd pay for that out of free cash.
Yeah, yeah. Reserve fund transfer.
Okay.
It's probably the best option for that. Or it could be free cash. We'll probably just end up in May. We'll have Candy pay for it out of elections, and then
Sure.
in May we'll make the adjustment.
Okay. Okay, I'll entertain a motion before we get into discussion.
Just any thought on a date before we make a motion?
You know, as sympathetic as I am to people wanting to get their signatures, I'd just as soon do it sooner rather than later. 16 days is a lot of time, and speaking as somebody who's done it a couple times now, it's really not that tough to get, what is it, 50? Yeah, I mean, it's not hard.
I agree. October 24th,
Yeah.
if the board agrees.
I can make a motion to that unless anyone else has a better date that they want to talk about. I'd love to hear
What
it.
day of the week is October 24th?
What's a Thursday?
We don't want to traditionally do it on a Tuesday.
I thought about the
You could do it the
27th.
following Tuesday. Town meeting is the 21st.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be the 29th would be the next following
That would be
Tuesday.
the last Tuesday of the month.
Yeah, I'd be
Could
okay
do
with
that.
that too.
The 29th.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Carlson.
I move the board vote to call a special election for the purpose of filling the select board seat vacated by Mr. Spinney and have the election on or about, we said, October 29th.
Motion made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? All right, great. So,
Get your signature.
step up, everybody.
Gives you
Let's,
21
let's go. So when would, that would give people until, now that we're, since we're just doing the math here, it's August 20th. That gives people until 16 days, would have been the 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4. Would that give them to the 10th, September 10th? Did I do that right?
So now they have 21 days. Is that 21 days from today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We'll see. Can't deal make it
Roughly,
clear. But
21
okay.
days from today is when forms will be back.
Okay. And they can pick those up at,
Town clerk's office.
all right, town clerk's office.
And just to clarify too, that will be filled until May.
Yes, and then that person will have to run again in May.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just filling a vacancy that
Yes.
Bruce Spinney left.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Select board reports, TA reports. Anything?
Well, I have a lot to say.
Go ahead,
So-
Jen.
Well, I'll get started because I was not given the opportunity to say anything last week. So I understand I was on vacation, as people do in mid-August, on a day that is typically a workshop meeting. So I was not here, which I understand, but it's not about me. It's actually about the people of the town who I feel were done a great disservice of not given any opportunity, a very minimal opportunity, to voice their concerns. And I watched the meeting, and there were so many things said that were just not true. First of all, I've been here for all of these, and it has never happened in the past. What typically happens is the group comes in to get a feel of the board. We have an introductory meeting. We chat about things. We don't sign a host agreement on that first night. We never have. So saying that this is something that we do on a regular basis is simply false. I also have a lot of concerns about the way it was handled. The chair of this board negotiated a host agreement as chair of the board.
No, I didn't.
With he negotiated the host agreement before he resigned.
Oh. I thought you were talking about me. Sorry, go on.
And which there's a lot of ethical concerns to that. He resigned 24 hours within the meeting. The agenda was set on Friday. Like the whole timeline was just rushed and screwy. And I had told our former chair that I was going to be away 4 weeks ago. So it wasn't like I was sick. It wasn't like I just didn't show up. It was a planned vacation in which I was not available. There were a lot of questions I would have asked that we typically ask. The financing, he did not go into financing at all. There was no good business plan. Who is his attorney of record? Mr. Prisby, I know you've done attorney work for him before.
Mm-hmm.
Are you also an attorney for Spinney Enterprises?
Not on this deal, no.
Are you, have you done work for Spinney Properties?
I handled an eviction matter for him, but that was over well before this.
So if you have a connection, why did you not recuse yourself?
Because that connection had begun and ended well before this ever came up. There was no conflict. I've been through section 17, 18, and 20 of the conflict law. There was simply no question. If you have an issue, you're certainly well within your right to file a complaint.
All right. certainly. Certainly we'll think about that. I have questions about where the product is being acquired. You guys didn't ask anything about that. There were no resumes, there was no CFO, there was no CEO, there was no business plan, there was no financing. There's just so much missing information that I just cannot even believe that what happened. And yeah, and it was done on a night that you knew that I was not going to be here. I do have some correspondence also that was not read, again, because this was sent to all of us, people that wanted to be here and could not be here. So I don't believe you guys read any correspondence about the matter. So I was gonna read some correspondence as well.
Go for it.
All right.
Excuse me, are we done with the select board reports? Because correspondence is next. I do have one quick update I want to give the board. before
Yeah,
she
why don't we-
goes into it.
why don't
I
we
just
hang on
want
for
to ask for the
correspondence?
courtesy, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Wonderful. So we just wanted to share that the last meeting I was appointed to the Capital Improvement Bylaw Committee per town meeting charge. We held our first meeting. We hope to have some draft language on or before the deadline, before town meeting warrant needs to be signed. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that we do plan on having something for this October town meeting per the charge. So just want to give everyone that update. And if anyone has any questions. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Doreen?
No, I don't have anything. I'd like Jen to have the opportunity to finish. Go ahead.
I was just going to read the correspondence, unless
Oh,
Peter, as our clerk, would like to read the correspondence.
I can read them if you'd like.
Sure, I mean, we were all sent them. I mean, we've been sent a lot of things lately. I noticed Mr. Yeoman's letter has also not been read, even though that was supposed to have been read weeks ago.
Well, is that true? I mean, we had this conversation about correspondence
Yeah.
earlier.
We did.
And the problem is, when people send us things, it's not, again, not clear whether or not they want it to be read or whether they're just voicing a concern.
Yeah.
So, if you want to read something, that's fine. Billy Yeoman's letter, we actually did discuss. It was pages and pages long.
There's 2 pages.
Okay, but
It's
at
in our
some point,
packet right now.
at some point, it's not practical to read 500 words, but if that's what you want to do, you're more than welcome.
Do you have a copy that I could read?
Sure.
Okay, let's see here. All right, August 13th, 2019, 6:21 p.m. from Elizabeth Putnam. Right there. Hello, I'm not able to make the meeting tonight, but I hope to watch a recording after the fact. Please know that I'm not in support of a marijuana facility on Worcester Street. While this may be an industrial zone, it is very close to community business, and it will be in a prominent location en route to the high school where when my son reaches that age. If it must go up here, can you put restrictions in place on the signage so it is not visible to teenagers? In addition, can you place some parking and transportation route restrictions to help minimize the impact to the traffic in the area? Also, I would like to suggest that you make your agendas a bit more transparent rather than say article number with, you will discuss, perhaps also mention what that means to everyday Grafton residents, also known as the topic of the article number. Or please link to the full text of the article number for us to read on our own. Thanks, Liz.
That's a good idea.
The next one was sent August 13, 2019 at 9:43 p.m. And this one is from Vipin Gupta. Hello, I've been a resident of Grafton for 14 years. One reason I moved to Grafton with my young family was it was being family-friendly town. While I'd like to make this town business-friendly, but we'd also like to be extremely careful in choosing what type of business we want in our town. We do not want Grafton to be seen as a town to any business just for the sake of additional revenue, especially with marijuana sale and production facilities. I would like you to know that I oppose of town welcoming such business just for short-sighted financial gain. It is important that Grafton is continued to be seen as a family-friendly town so that we continue to welcome young families here, just like mine. Best regards, Vipin Gupta. Was there any more?
Nope, those are the 2.
Great. Anything else?
Nope.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
In light of that correspondence, I just would like to say that I did bring up some of those points during the meeting. I won't go into detail, but there was one thing that I did mention to Becca. I had a phone conversation, I think in passing last week, about, or with Tim, I should say, not with you, Becca. I think he was going to loop you into this, so sorry if you added more work to your schedule. But was looking at a way to be a little bit more descriptive in the agenda items. And I do agree with what was said that, for example, DPW update Andy DeShane budget resolution. I mean, to any layperson out there who reads that in the agenda item, they don't really know
Right.
what action item are we really taking. And I kind of do have to agree with that, is there a way that we can be a little bit more transparent with any and all of our agenda items to perhaps maybe educate the public that may want to at least participate live or watch online about, oh, I might want to watch that portion of the meeting because they're talking about something that may or may not impact what we're doing. So I did reach out to Tim, had a great conversation about this, and he said that he would, and if the board is okay with that, to really kind of come up with maybe an enhanced format, kind of keeping the same structure, but have some descriptive or descriptions as to a little bit more than what's written here. He said that, you know, when he gets back or when he speaks to you, Becca, he said probably work on some ideas and maybe at a workshop at a future date, maybe this is something that the board may want to consider using moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Particularly, I mean, again, you know, DPW budget was up there, or DPW update was on there. And I just added the budget resolution portion, knowing that, you know, DPW update could mean just about anything. Where are you along with construction? But, you know, tonight we heard options for coming up with an additional $1 million, which is certainly a big deal. So that's a point well taken.
Can I respond to that very quickly?
Sure.
So we actually, we did get that note also. So I think, you know, we put all the packets online, just so everybody knows. On Fridays, everything that you all get, everybody has access to. But we realized that a lot of people were looking at the calendar on the website, which just has the agenda posting. So if you don't know that the packet lives elsewhere on the website, you just look at the agenda and you say, well, that's it. So we actually, on this agenda, for a complete copy of the packet, visit and then put a link that will link directly from the agenda that's posted on the calendar to where the packet lives on the webpage. So I mean, we can put more detail on the actual agenda if you want, that's fine, but all of the backup information that you all get is available to everybody, all the memos that are in the packet, all the detail that Cindy writes ahead of each item, so just so people know.
Okay.
That's available as well.
Great. Thanks for that update.
Yeah.
Okay. Discussion. Revenue.
Actually, Mr. Chair, real quick, can I just give one quick update?
Oh, yeah,
Just
sure.
so
Oh,
people
sorry.
know? I'm
Totally
sorry.
skipped over you.
So I just want to remind folks that the railroad is beginning construction this week at Waterville and East Street. They're going to be upgrading their crossings. So Waterville Street and East Street will be closed completely, 24 hours a day, from August 22nd to the 26th. So it's going to be hectic. There's already a lot of construction going on up there. National Grid is still up on Route 30. Semco's on Route 30 because they've started working on the sewer Mass Works project. So there will be detours in place. There will be details on site, 24 hours. We've talked to the school. We know that the buses are running their like preliminary routes next week. So that's been worked out. They've made adjustments to make sure that the buses are accounted for. But just want everyone to know, whoever's watching this, that the 22nd, this Thursday, it's going to be a little busy up there.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all.
All right. Discussion, revenue and expense projections. So we haven't had a discussion about long-term forecasts since May. So I'd asked this to be put on the agenda to go over, where are we now? I know free cash isn't certified yet,
No.
right? Okay.
No,
Do we
the
know?
books aren't closed.
Okay.
So I don't have an updated projection to show you, because the books aren't closed, new growth's not certified, new growth is not certified, free cash is not certified. Those are a lot of sort of the benchmarks that we use when we're looking at outward.
Sure.
What is our tone back like? Did we meet, revenue marks? Did we, overextend ourselves on expenses, et cetera? And because some adjustments happen with closing the books, we hesitate to use those numbers until they've been finalized.
Right.
Just a couple quick things. I talked to Anita a little bit this afternoon, and Mary. New growth is not certified, but it will exceed FY20 projections. So we put 550 in the budget. It's looking closer to 800. So that's fantastic. That's some money that will hopefully be available in October to raise and appropriate and put towards the many, many things that we have on the list. Building permits, preliminary numbers, we made the number for FY19, likely exceeded it in terms of revenue. I don't have exact numbers yet because the books aren't closed, but right now things look good. Interest on investments also came in high. That's just from Amy Perkins. I had her run the numbers really quick today. Looks like about 50,000 over revenue estimates. So that's all good news. Health insurance, we received our loss ratio, which is the number that they look at when they're assessing what our costs will be for the upcoming year. We are well within a tolerable range for a municipality. So Harvard Pilgrim, who is our carrier, along with our consultant, has told us that we don't foresee the number being higher than 7. That's like the top of the range. So that's good news. It's still a big number, but it's, could be worse. So those are just like little pieces. I don't have it all like in a format for you right now because the chart hasn't been formally updated. But once the books close, free cash gets certified, new growth gets certified, we can start to back into those projections a little bit.
Okay. I know that we're waiting, or typically we wait for free cash to be certified once the state closes their books and gets us back their cherry sheet numbers. We got the cherry sheet numbers back already, right? Okay. So is Anita looking at like mid-September?
Oh, free cash, she wants to have it certified by the end of the month.
Okay, that'd
So
be
we
great.
are like close.
If we could revisit this again, probably, I don't know when our meeting is in September. So we get next
Third.
week's, so the
Yep.
3rd. Maybe if we did it the 17th,
Oh, yeah.
if we penciled it in for then, that'd be a good idea.
Well, as we start talking about the warrant, also funding sources for October,
Right.
we're gonna have to talk about that
Because
stuff.
things are going to start ramping up again.
Yeah.
And we're going to, do the same cycle we did last year. We're going to need to talk to school committee, finance committee, bring them in, and have the discussion about where FY21 is going.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to have to happen sooner rather than later, I'd imagine.
I agree.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Long-term tree account?
Yeah, so this is sort of an idea that Paul Canoia, Tim, and I sort of just came up with last week. I know that we've updated the board a little bit about the cost of tree removal. We have a lot of dead trees in town that are town-owned trees. They're big trees, they're old, they are safety hazards. We have a list of probably over 100 right now, trees that we know we own and we need to take down. It costs about $5,000 a day to have a tree company out here taking down trees, and if it's a really big tree, sometimes they can only do one a day. So it's a very, very long list. So we were thinking about approaching this sort of how we approach the long-term IT account, because it's a project that's going to be ongoing for several years, likely. It would be a long-term tree removal and replacement account. So as we removed trees, we would obviously replace them, hopefully on private property, so that they could be maintained by homeowners rather than the town, and we can keep our tree city designation, because having trees in town is important not only for the designation but for the environment. That's what it's really important for. So, and we want to continue that. So we're proposing putting an article on town meeting, the October town meeting warrant, to create this account, fund it. I'm not entirely sure what the funding source is at this time. Likely free cash, or raise and appropriate, depending on what we have. And then sort of like we do with the long-term IT account, just gradually, every town meeting, put a little bit more money in so that we can deal with what we have now and make sure that we can stay on top of trees in the future that do die or that require maintenance or so forth.
Great.
So,
Okay.
I have a
Question?
Question, yeah. What's the current budget for tree removal? Do you know? for maintenance?
It got cut
Yep.
in the FY twenty budget. It's inside the DPW budget. Gosh, I don't know. I wanna say 50,000.
Okay.
But I
That's
can
low.
get you, I can
Yeah.
get you
No,
a firm
that's-
number. I do know that, when we were developing the FY twenty budget, Paul did make a large ask, much higher than in previous years, because he knew that trees were gonna become an issue. And when we were doing the budget cuts, it was one of the things that got cut,
Okay.
because it wasn't previously in the budget, so.
Right. And then, my other question, and I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but the municipal vulnerability preparedness program that the town was
Yeah.
awarded.
MVP, yeah?
Yep. The action items for those. So tree removal may, if it's one of the top priorities for the community, we may be able to get grant funding through that MVP action plan. So that's something
Talk
we
to
might
Joe
want to
about
look
that.
into, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, moving on. Do we have meeting minutes?
No, but we will have them on the third.
Okay. One last question. Am I signing everything in the purple folder, just me?
No, that's the solar agreement. That's for everybody to sign. The thing in the green folder is just for you to sign.
Okay,
That's
'cause
Blue Wave Solar, right? Oh,
Yeah.
actually, is there a charge in there too?
it just says
Yeah,
Town
the
of
charge.
Grafton, and there's only one signatory line.
Oh, okay.
So
Didn't put much-
people
so
can just
You
sign
could
below.
just do for, yeah, you can just, yeah, you guys can just sign the bottom.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine. The charge that's in there is a charge that's already been voted on. Cindy
Right.
just,
right,
you know,
updated it.
packaged it up and put signature on
All
it.
right, I'm gonna leave. Yeah, okay. I'll just pass these over.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, anything else? Doesn't look like it. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion
Second.
made, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.